Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest to everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. At 9:40 p.m., the kitchen smelled of lemon cleaner and canned chicken soup. The furnace clicked on, the window glass hummed. Marlene Ortiz stood at the counter in her house shoes, watching noodles loosen in a red Campbell's bowl. She wasn't hungry. She was delaying a decision already made. Her phone buzzed beside the stove. A rooftop selfie of Vanessa flashed up, then the text, "Leftovers in the fridge, don't waste food." Marlene looked at the message until her reflection replaced it. Silver hair twisted, neat cardigan misbuttoned at the top. She typed a single word, "okay," and set the phone down. The soup had skinned over. She shut off the burner, poured the bowl into the sink, rinsed without a sound. The house held its breath. Somewhere upstairs, the vent ticked as metal cooled. She wiped the counter one last time, then reached into the slim cabinet above the fridge. A hook held a ring of spare keys and a ceramic tag Ethan bought at a street fair. Home is where we... The glaze had chipped off the last word. She slipped the keys into her pocket. In the hall, Vanessa's perfume still floated a clean citrus. Marlene had ironed the blouse Vanessa wore tonight and pressed Ethan's shirt, found the kids' dress shoes, packed wet wipes in a Ziploc and said, "Have fun the way you say, drive safe." She went to the small bedroom that used to be the guest room and pulled the lamp chain. The suitcase sat on the closet shelf behind a crocheted Afghan. It thunked onto the bed. Hinges squeaked, no one heard. 3 pairs of slacks, 2 cardigans, the black church dress, socks in a neat row, medicine organizer, reading glasses, a framed photo of Ethan at 16 with his trumpet. From the bottom dresser drawer, she slid out a manila envelope. Inside were originals with raised seals and copies stamped in purple ink, a recorded warranty deed from the county recorder. A closing statement with her maiden name in the corner, receipts for the refrigerator, the water heater, the winter roof repair. Each page wore a sticky note in her handwriting, dates, amounts, check numbers. She placed the envelope in the suitcase, then took it back out and set it in the top dresser drawer. On the nightstand lay a small red flash drive with a scuffed cap labeled with masking tape "Household." She checked it on her old laptop, scans of receipts, bank transfers, maintenance photos, a few voice memos she did not play, then slid the drive into her cardigan pocket. The Afghan caught her eye. She had mended it last winter, counting stitches in the window's morning light. For a moment she folded it into the suitcase. A moment later she put it back on the chair. At the desk, she pulled a sheet from Vanessa's box of thank you cards and printed carefully, like filling out a school form. Ethan keys on the hook by the garage. Documents in the top dresser drawer. If you need confirmation, call Mr. Whitaker at the escrow office. M. No explanations, no apology, no destination. In the laundry room, she took the jacket she used for early buses, the one with deep pockets. On her way back, she paused at the kids' hallway to straighten a tilted class photo. 2 faces she loved beyond reason beamed from the second row. Her phone buzzed again, the Denver skyline under a violet dusk. Vanessa's caption in all caps, "Regional baby." Marlene set the phone face down. The furnace clicked off. The house exhaled. She shut every light except the one at the top of the stairs. At the kitchen threshold, she looked back, memorizing the room. Counters clear, dish towel folded over the oven handle, floor still damp in streaks that smelled like lemons. The suitcase was lighter than she expected. In the entryway, she slid her feet into the walking shoes by the rack. The laces remembered the knot. She locked the deadbolt with care and slipped the keys into her pocket, then took them back out and hung them on the hook. Outside, the sodium streetlight turned the remnant snow at the curb the color of tea. A sprinkler ticked somewhere in the dark. The cul-de-sac air was so dry she could taste iron. Marlene pulled her jacket close, set the suitcase on its wheels, and walked toward the corner where ride-shares found the address faster. She didn't look back. She knew which stair creaked and which cabinet never caught on the first try. The wind lifted and fell. Far-off sirens combed the freeway. A dog barked 2 streets over the sound, small and far. A sedan slowed near the stop sign, headlights washing over her and sliding away. She checked the time, 9:58. The driver she had requested pinged 5 minutes out. She put the phone away and wrapped both hands around the suitcase handle. Her palms were steady. The furnace would cycle on again. The ice maker would cough. The lemon smell would fade by morning. Under the streetlight, she let the dry air clear the steam of boiled noodles from her coat. The jacket rustled. The wheels clicked once on a crack in the sidewalk and went still. She breathed in slow and even and held it for a count before letting it go. The sedan eased to the curb wipers whispering across a clean windshield. Marlene, the driver, called through a cracked window. She lifted the suitcase in and slid onto the back seat. The heater blew dry air on her shins. The dashboard clock clicked from 10:02 to 10:003. As the car rolled past the cul-de-sac mailbox cluster and the HOA sign about holiday lights, the glass held her face for a beat, lined composed awake, and then the street lamps took it away. 2 years and some months earlier, she had sat in a different chair under a different kind of light fluorescent bars in a title office off Havana Street. A pot of dusty ficus leaves leaned toward the copier. The escrow officer, a neat man with a navy tie, pointed at the closing packet with a capped pen. Given the size of your down payment, Ms. Ortiz will record the warranty deed in your name to start. You can add them later through a quick claim. Cleaner for underwriting. Vanessa squeezed Ethan's hand and said, "Perfect. We'll do the ad later." Marlene initialed where the little flags told her to. A notary stamp thumped. The ficus didn't move. She had sold her Lakewood townhouse, the narrow one by the Greenbelt, the one with the squeaky screen door and the triangle of morning sun on the breakfast table. The check had cleared. Her pension from the school district landed on the 15th. She had made a list. "We can pool," Ethan said, at the kitchen island of the new place, bright quartz still smelling like construction dust, "until daycare prices come down." "It's just for a bit," Marlene smiled. Pooling was a word for summer. She wrote mortgage due on a paper calendar and underlined it. Routine grew around her wrists like bracelets she forgot to take off. The furnace coughed at 5:40 a.m., and she set the drip machine going, 2 scoops rounded, 1 flat, a pinch of cinnamon, because Ethan liked the smell. Lunch boxes, peanut butter on one, turkey on the other, grapes, cut in halves, napkin with the sun, drawn in the corner. The bus hissed at the corner at 7:08, rain or shine. She jogged back when a mitten was missing. She ironed Ethan's shirts on Sunday afternoons to get ahead of the week, hung them by color on the rail, slid cardboard under collars so they kept their shape. Vanessa would come in late from a spin class, peel off a windbreaker, and run 2 fingers along the top of the bookcase. "We've got dust, Marlene, not a complaint, not quite a thank you either." An observation offered like a weather report. The first winter brought the roof leak. A bright amber circle bloomed above the staircase after a run of snow and thaw. Marlene stood on the second step and touched the paint. It left her fingertip damp. She called the number on the HOA sheet, then a roofer, then the roofer's roofer, when the first one didn't return a message. The invoice came to $126 with tax. She paid it from the checking account she still thought of as hers, wrote the check number on a sticky note, taped the note to the invoice, slid both into a clear sleeve, and labeled the sleeve "Roof." The binder grew: appliances, repairs, tax, mortgage. With tabs, she cut herself because the store-bought ones never stuck. The mortgage paid out on the first of the month, always more than Ethan expected. "Autopay's set for $600, he said, face lit by his laptop calendar squares packed with meetings. "We'll make the rest work when bonuses hit." Bonuses didn't hit. Marlene moved 900 and something from pension to mortgage, as quietly as she moved laundry from washer to dryer. It wasn't heroism. It was arithmetic. She logged each transfer in shorthand month after month, handwriting steady blue ink for odd months, black for even. Vanessa managed the house like the office she was rising through. A label maker appeared on the counter and stuck its judgments to jars. Flour, sugar, rice, kids' cups, pods wreck the washer, she announced, dropping a jug of liquid detergent into the cabinet. Use the caps and fill to line 2. She held up a towel and refolded it so the edges met in perfect thirds hotel fold. When friends came over from her department on Fridays, Marlene ferried platters from oven to island and rinsed glasses in a rhythm learned from years of band banquets and PTA. "Your house runs itself," one of the friends said to Vanessa, spearing a stuffed mushroom. Vanessa lifted her chin. "System is everything." "Grandma's waffles are better," the little one said one Saturday, syrup glistening on her chin. Vanessa laughed too brightly. "Because Grandma has all day," she said. "Mommy has a 10 o'clock. No one was unkind in front of the children. Unkindness lived in small drawers, the way a compliment turned into a comparison mid-sentence, the way thanks drifted out of a room before Marlene could tell where it had landed. The first time she wasn't in a picture, she didn't notice. She took the photo Ethan with a hand on each kid's shoulder. Vanessa angled toward the light, and later it showed up on her phone through some app that they'd insisted on installing. The second time she noticed. She was in the mirror behind them, small and blurry dish towel over her shoulder, a slash of blue cardigan. She pressed her thumb on the screen to make the image grow, but her face pixelated and slipped. Later in bed, she told herself it was nothing, and then she placed a blank index card at the front of the binder and wrote a single line not in photos. 3/18. There were warm days. Of course there were. The kids piled books in her lap and demanded voices. Ethan caught her elbow on black ice outside the library and said, "Careful, Ma," like he had at 15. The neighbor's dog escaped 3 times, and each time found her in the driveway with a pocket of treats, tail helicoptering, paws muddy on her slacks. Warm didn't cancel other temperatures. It just existed next to them. Spring brought the refrigerator that rattled like a truck in low gear. "We'll need a new one," Vanessa said, scrolling ratings on her phone. "I like the counter depth with the bottom freezer." Marlene liked the one with the long bar handle that didn't pinch your knuckles. She bought the one Vanessa liked and kept her opinion. She kept the receipt, too. Slid it under appliances behind a printout she'd made of the Energy Guide label. She learned the building where Vanessa's team met for offsites had a rooftop patio from the caption below a sunset in March Beacon on 32nd. Tonight earned it. 2 months later, a selfie and sunglasses, new quarter, new ladder. Don't wait for permission. Marlene enlarged the photo once. Then, twice, then pushed the phone aside and went to iron shirts. There were comments you didn't put in a binder. In the walk-in closet when they thought she'd gone outside, if my mom moved in, she'd pay rent. She would if she could. In the kitchen, when Marlene's back was turned at the stove, I swear it's like having a nanny, a chef, and facilities rolled into one. "You're lucky," someone said. "I'm smart," Vanessa answered, laughing, and the laugh sounded not quite the same as the one she used with the children. Marlene stood with a wooden spoon in her hand and stirred until the sauce took shape. On a Tuesday that turned icy by 4 p.m., the water heater coughed and died. Ethan was stuck on I-225 behind a wreck. Vanessa had a late call. Marlene boiled kettles and sponged the kids in the warmest bathroom, shifting them from stool to towel like a chef does pancakes at a busy breakfast. In the morning, she met the plumber in a housecoat and sneakers, signed, paid and taped the new receipt to the old receipt with the note replaced unit warranty and folder. She tucked the warranty into the sleeve in front of the old one so someone would find it, even if that someone was only her. When she couldn't sleep, she sat at the dining table with the laptop Ethan had given her on Mother's Day and scanned. The binder pages became PDFs, receipts turned into files with dates and the names. The little red flash drive appeared one day from a junk drawer and stayed. She learned how to click and drag. She learned how to make a folder called Household and how to make another called Household Backup because the first one looked lonely. She wasn't preparing to leave. She was putting things in order. The phrases sounded different and looked the same. On a Sunday morning in June, the kids played driveway basketball with a wobbly hoop Ethan had zip-tied to a fence post. Vanessa leaned on the porch rail and called elbows in. Buddy Marlene wiped pollen from the patio table with a damp cloth and felt the quiet settle under her ribs, like a stone finding its place in a riverbed. She didn't name the feeling. She watched the ball arc hit the backboard and drop. The sedan turned from Mississippi onto Peoria. The driver adjusted the radio down to the edge of hearing. "You from Denver originally?" he asked, conversational the way night drivers get through the last shift. "Close enough," she said. He nodded as if that answered something he hadn't asked. Her hands lay open on her lap, palms up the way she used to rest them when she waited for the principal to call a meeting to order. The city slid by gas stations, a taqueria with a neon cactus, a shuttered mattress store. At a red light, kids on scooters zipped across the crosswalk, hats low against the cold. The glove box rattled when the car idled. Marlene pressed her lips together and inhaled. The heater smelled faintly of dust. They crossed under the freeway lane, signs green and exact. The driver's turn signal ticked like a metronome as he eased left. Marlene checked the pocket of her jacket without looking. Flash drive, chapstick, folded index card with an address in her own careful block letters. The zip tug squeaked when her thumb brushed it. The light changed. The car moved forward. She sat back and let the quiet be what it was. At 1:07 a.m., the garage door shuttered up and the car eased into its stall headlights, flattening the paint cans and the stroller wheels, and the rake hung just crooked enough to snag a sleeve. The engine ticked as it cooled. Ethan unbuckled the sleeping 6-year-old with the slow care of a bomb tech. The 8-year-old snored bluntly, head tilted. Vanessa half laughed at something she couldn't remember, then pressed her lips together, holding the laugh in so it wouldn't echo. She smelled like dry red wine and a citrus perfume that had lost its top notes hours ago. They came in through the mudroom. The lemon cleaner had faded to a thinner ghost of itself, but the floor still shone in long, drag mop strokes. Vanessa toed off her heels on the mat, lined them up heel to heel, and reached for the light above the sink. The kitchen flattened into brightness, counters, wiped dish towel, folded bowls nested like a showroom. Nana, the 6-year-old, murmured, face pressed to Ethan's shoulder. "Shh," Ethan said, automatic, the way he said it when the baby had been a baby. Vanessa tried a soft call. Marlene, silence, but not the usual kind. No kettle starting itself into a low rumble. No chair legs scraping, no NPR mumble from the radio on the windowsill. The ice maker hiccuped. The furnace breathed. Vanessa crossed to the stove as if the room might tell on itself. The red Campbell's bowl was upside down in the drying rack, water beads clinging to its rim. On the island, the bottle of lemon cleaner stood square with the edge label facing out. The list magneted to the fridge, Thursday trash/recycling, had a check mark in Marlene's tidy slant. Underneath a magnet shaped like an avocado, framed a photo that had not been there at dinner, 2 kids on a rope swing, in July, light, Marlene's hand in the corner ring catching a flare. Ethan carried one child upstairs and came back for the other. The second one woke halfway blinking and asked the same question the first had asked without words. "Where's Nana?" "Sleeping," he said, because sleep was the kindest lie. They tucked them at the ritual of corners, smoothed water sipped, stuffed bear positioned just so. On the landing, Vanessa paused, head cocked, listening for a rustle from the guest room that had long ago given up the right to be called a guest room. She pushed the door with 2 knuckles. The bed was made in the way only Marlene made it, the spread pulled taut. The pillows fluffed and set at attention, the throw folded with its scalloped edge exactly aligned. The closet door stood half open. Inside, empty hangers spaced evenly, a cedar block on the shelf, the absence of cardigans like missing teeth. On the nightstand, the reading glasses were gone. The small white jar of blue capsules that always sat at the back label, peeled from the humidity of repeated hands, wasn't there either. A rectangle of lighter wood showed where a frame photo had been. "Ethan," Vanessa said without sounding like she was calling him. He appeared in the doorway and saw the room as if for the first time. His mother's robe was not on the hook behind the door. The slippers that always slept under the chair had left 2 clean ovals in the dust she never let gather. A sheet of cream stationery lay on the dresser, centered square. Vanessa kept the pretty cards in a drawer for thank yous. This sheet had come from that box, the edges deckled like wedding paper. Ethan recognized his mother's neat print before he'd read a word. Ethan keys on the hook by the garage. Documents in the top dresser drawer. If you need confirmation, call Mr. Whitaker at the escrow office. M. No more. He slid the top drawer. A manila envelope filled almost the whole space. It was thick enough to spring back when he lifted it. Inside photocopies on good paper, the purple stamp of the Arapahoe County clerk and recorder bleeding through an embossed seal. A scanned closing disclosure with his own name in the field marked buyer and his mother's name on the deed in a font that didn't blink. Receipts in sequence with dates and check numbers on small sticky notes. Each note the same compact handwriting he had learned to recognize before he could read. Vanessa reached for the deed with careful fingers not touching the seal. "This looks official." "It is official," Ethan said, because official was what the purples and embossing and page codes meant. He found the spot where the recorder's stamp had left a time and date. It was the month they'd moved in, the week he had driven to work in 2 trips, because the box with his monitors didn't fit with the bag of sports equipment the kids couldn't live without. He remembered the escrow officer's navy tie, the way the ficus had leaned toward the copier, the line about adding them later. He had nodded without understanding how later works if no one puts it on a calendar. Vanessa's mouth pressed flat. She set the deed down as if it were warm. It left the faint ring of its weight in the dust that wasn't there. "There's a phone number," Ethan said, pointing at the note. "Whitaker." He thumbed it into his phone and stared at the screen that told him it was too late. He left a message anyway, his voice steadier than he felt the contents, almost comically polite. "Hi, Mr. Whitaker. This is Ethan Ortiz. My mother is, Marlene. I found a deed and could you call me when you get this?" He hung up and opened his laptop. The county site loaded with patient government slowness. He typed the address into the property search, the cursor spinning as if catching its breath between forms. When the parcel came up, owner of record Marlene Ortiz stared at them in a font that could not be argued out of. Vanessa sat on the edge of the bed and put both hands on her knees. The hem of her dress rode up and she tugged it down, unthinking the way she did in conference rooms. Did she? The rest of the sentence refused to endorse any verb. "She recorded it when we closed," Ethan said. His thumb had found the date stamp again. "We said we'd add ourselves later." He was aware of the house around them, the way you're aware of a person in the room who has stopped talking. The vent ticked once. Somewhere downstairs the fridge cycled. The kids' nightlight threw a soft green moon against the hall wall. Vanessa stood and walked to the living room as if the idea of sitting had developed splinters. On the shelf over the TV, the little ceramic donkey Marlene had rescued from a yard sale was gone. The Italian stovetop pot Ethan had teased her about using every single morning was not on the back burner. The stack of crocheted coasters tied with a ribbon rested on the coffee table as always, but the ribbon was loose and the top coaster bore the absent circle of a cup that wasn't there. She took what belongs to her. Vanessa said the sentence ending early as if there were a cliff where a preposition should be. She rubbed her brow with the heel of her hand. Her nails immaculate at the restaurant had a chip she hadn't noticed. "We should call her," Ethan called. It went to voicemail, his mother's voice, the familiar recording that had soothed him the year he'd moved away and known no one in a city with streets that ran the wrong direction. He hung up and called again. On the third try, he said, "Mom, we're home. I saw your note. Please call me." Vanessa paced the kitchen in a small square as if constrained by painter's tape only she could see. The clock over the sink shifted to 1:32. She opened the fridge and looked at the containers she had texted about as if they might contain an explanation. A rotisserie chicken leg sat in a pool of congealed fat rice, steamed into one mass broccoli, now the particular shade of green vegetables become when they've seen too much refrigerator light. Vanessa shut the door gently and leaned her forehead on the freezer handle for a breath before stepping back. Ethan spread the contents of the envelope across the island on the left. The deed and the recorder's printout. In a center column, the closing statement in the wire receipt from the sale of his mother's Lakewood place. To the right, the numbered stack of invoices, roof, water heater, fridge, each with a sticky flag marking a date and a dollar amount. He recognized his own quick signature on one or two repair authorizations. In most places, his name appeared in the corner marked emergency contact, a designation that had always felt inevitable and suddenly insufficient. He found the binder, not the pretty one with flowers Vanessa had bought and abandoned, but the fat, practical one with a scuffed black spine and corners softened by touching on the second shelf of the pantry behind the flour canister. It was heavier than it looked. Tabs labeled in blue and black: mortgage, HOA, tax, appliances, repairs. At the very front, an index card stapled to the inside cover. Not in photos, 318. He read it without understanding, then understood it a half-second later and closed his eyes as if closing his eyes could make time reverse. "Ethan," Vanessa said from the doorway as if she were asking him to sign for a package. He turned. Her face always composed the face that won meetings looked newly made like clay that had not hardened yet. She left her keys. "They're on the hook," he said, hearing how simple and how complicated a sentence could be. A small shape appeared at the archway, hair standing up in sleep ridges. "You should be in bed, kiddo. Where's Nana?" The voice was thin with the salt of recently cried tears. They had laughed too hard in the car, and then the quiet had slid under their skin. "She's not here," Ethan said. "She left a note." He didn't show it. He bent and gathered the small body into his arms, felt the heavy trust of it, the way it gave all its weight. Vanessa stood very straight, as if proper posture could defend against whatever was not standing. She was not unkind. It would be untrue to say she was ever simply one thing. She walked to the island and touched the top corner of the deed with a finger, as if checking that paper could hold its shape. She looked at the magnet with the avocado frame, then at the towel folded on the oven handle, then at the bowl in the rack, and exhaled in a sound that could have been a laugh or not. "Do you want me to?" she started, and then didn't finish because every verb had consequences. Ethan carried the child upstairs. The nightlight's green landed on his forearm. He tucked the blanket under a chin the way his mother had taught him, in a long-ago house that smelled like laundry soap and pencil shavings. He paused at the threshold, hand on the frame, surprised by the old muscle memory of standing guard. Downstairs, Vanessa rinsed her hands under water left too long on hot. Steam fogged the window and set tiny droplets on the aloe plant Marlene had coaxed through 3 winters. Vanessa wiped a circle with the side of her wrist and saw her reflection in the hole of clear. Her mouth made a line she didn't quite recognize. She turned off the tap, shook her hands once hard, then reached for a dish towel that smelled like lemon and sun. Ethan came back to the kitchen and, without talking, lined the papers into a fresh order deed and recorder printout on top, binder to the left, receipts under his palm. He placed his phone in the center of the island, face up in case the call came. He stood there with the posture of a man who has stepped into a cold river and hasn't yet decided whether to swim or back out. The furnace came on. The ice maker dropped a hollow cube. Outside, a car passed tires, whispering on dry pavement. The house held what it had always held: walls and appliances, vents and ducts rooms named for the things people did in them, air moving through. Vanessa pulled out a stool and sat. Ethan didn't. He traced the raised county seal with a thumb, feeling the texture insist on itself. The clock moved toward 2. The lemon smell thinned almost to memory. The papers didn't argue, didn't console. They occupied space square and legible under the island light. The call came just after 8. Ethan's phone buzzed on the island beside the deed. Mr. Whitaker's voice rode a thin line of morning static.
"Yes, I recorded it myself," he said after Ethan explained. "Owner of record is Miss Ortiz. That's not a dispute. He offered calm sentences the way a nurse offers ice chips. If there's to be any change, it needs signatures and witnesses, not assumptions."
Ethan thanked him, wrote nothing on the notepad he'd pulled, and stared at the blank page as if its refusal to take ink were the truest part. At 10, sunlight fell in long bars across a law office on the second floor of a brick building near the old airfield. The lobby smelled like coffee and new carpet. A framed zoning map of the county watched the door. A receptionist with a winter cough showed Marlene to a glass-walled conference room where a carafe steamed beside 2 legal pads. Ms. Ortiz. The lawyer moved like a man who tidied as he went. Riley Boone-trim suit sleeves shortened by a tailor who cared shook her hand with a grip that said he knew signers' wrists got tired. "I read the recorder's file and Mr. Whitaker's note," he said, opening a folder. "You're in good standing. The question is what you want, not what you can force." "What I want," Marlene said and stopped. The room held its sound like a case keeps a violin. She could hear the building's heat click and settle. "I want to be treated like a person who pays bills and folds laundry and keeps track of warranties," she said, and Riley nodded as if that too were a claim that could be recorded. He outlined choices without theater notice to vacate under landlord-tenant law, with the blunt edge that option often carried. A direct buyout at fair market rates, clean and cold, or a mediated arrangement that acknowledged more than square footage. He didn't call any of it justice. He called it enforceable. "They'll be here at 11, he said. "I invited Mr. Whitaker to join by phone so there's no confusion over title. If you want the conversation to be short, we can make it short." "It should be clear," Marlene answered. "That's different." At 10:57, Ethan stood at the office door with a man's posture that couldn't find a place to settle. Vanessa came half a step behind, hair smoothed back, a dark dress and flats that didn't click on hardwood. The receptionist led them in. Vanessa nodded at Marlene without quite meeting her eyes. Ethan did meet them and held for a heartbeat. Riley rose. "I'm Boone. Counsel for Ms. Ortiz," he said. He shook their hands, then gestured to chairs. He kept the table free of everything but a stack of letter-sized paper, a digital recorder no bigger than a matchbox, and 2 pens with real weight. "We're here because the deed is in Ms. Ortiz's name." Riley began voice level. "Mr. Whitaker," speakerphone static cracked, then a neat voice. "I can confirm. Owner of record Marlene Ortiz recorded the week of closing. It wasn't unkind. It was a ledger line read out loud." Vanessa sat very straight. "We didn't know she said the sentence a coat 2 sizes too big. We planned later. Later didn't happen," Riley said without heat. "So we're dealing with now. Ms. Ortiz doesn't need the court to enforce this. She asked for mediation first." Ethan's shoulders lowered a 1/4 inch. He looked at his mother. She kept her gaze on Riley's folder. Riley slid the first page across. Option 1, notice to vacate. 30 days. You gather your belongings, Mrs. Cole, Mr. Ortiz, and deliver possession. Clean. Utilities current. Keys returned. Vanessa's throat worked. Ethan's eyes dropped to the wood grain. Option 2. Riley continued, setting a second page on top of purchase. You buy Ms. Ortiz's interest at fair value. That includes reimbursement of her documented investments, down payment, mortgage, differentials, repairs, appliances, less any agreed credits. We'd commission an appraisal. Payment schedule is negotiable. Collateral would be the property itself. Vanessa flicked a look toward Ethan. He shook his head, once small the movement of a man doing math on a thin line of margin. Option 3, Riley said, and now his hand rested flat on a third page that wasn't a template co-ownership with terms. 60% recorded to Ms. Ortiz, 40 to you jointly. Exclusive use and occupancy by you. Subject to a lease on Ms. Ortiz's 60%. That lease allows a tenant of Ms. Ortiz's choosing to share common spaces and occupy designated bedrooms pursuant to a floor plan addendum and house rules. Rent flows to Ms. Ortiz via auto debit on the first. HOA remains with the property, utilities apportioned by usage or set ratios. Dispute resolution mediation clause, review at 6 months. Vanessa blinked. You mean live with strangers? I mean share a house, Riley said, with terms you read and sign. Ethan braced his hands on his knees. And the deed, recorded as co-owners, Riley replied. 2 names to the one that's already there. Percentages reflected in the deed and in a tenancy in common agreement. No one sells without offering right of first refusal. If one party breaches, remedies are spelled out. It's not a handshake. Marlene watched their faces the way she had watched students' faces when she'd handed back tests, who scanned for red marks, who smoothed the paper as if a crease were a grade. There's an additional agreement, she said. Riley slid the 4th page shorter, plainer. Between my son and me. Ethan read, weekly counseling for 6 months with a licensed therapist of their choosing. Scheduling flexibility labeled in with a fountain pen. Payment terms split in ink of 2 different blues. He read it twice. He didn't look up until he had to. Okay, he said, not for appearance, but because the word simple as it was had the shape of consent. Riley capped his pen. This is not punitive, he said, choosing words like he was placing cups on a tray. It's structural. It keeps people in the home and recognizes who kept the home standing. Vanessa touched the top page. Again, option 1 as if to confirm its edges. We'll choose 3, she said, voice quiet. She stepped back from the sentence and stood beside it like a witness. Then we get it on paper, Riley said. He turned to the phone. Mr. Whitaker, are you available at 2 to witness signatures on revised deed and the TIC agreement? Joe. I can be, the neat voice replied. Send over drafts beforehand. Riley emailed the draft set. While the printer warmed and exhaled, he looked at Vanessa. You can ask for red lines on house rules. If there's a noise clause you want or a courtesy window for laundry hours, say it now. This only works if it's explicit. Vanessa nodded, swallowed, and said, quiet after 10 on weeknights unless it's an emergency. The phrase sounded learned at a condo board meeting and also like a thing she would follow herself. Marlene requested a simple list label shelves by occupant in the fridge. 2 Saturday dinners a month cooked by the tenant family and 2 by the household. Shared chores rotated by week on a chart printed and stuck to the fridge with the avocado magnet. None of it was revenge-shaped. It was functional. They broke long enough for coffee and paper cups with lids that never quite fit. Ethan stood with his back to the zoning map cup untouched and said, Mom. She met him halfway across the room. They didn't do apologies. They did presents. He nodded once slow as if setting a metronome. At 1:58, Mr. Whitaker's sedan slid into a street spot out front. He came in with a briefcase older than a few marriages and set a stamp and a seal on the table, aligning them like a man who had learned neatness when ink still took a breath to dry. He shook hands all around, removed his glasses to wipe a smudge no one else could see, and read the deed language aloud. His voice made even the commas sound necessary. Tenancy in common, he read 60% undivided interest to Marlene Ortiz, 40% undivided interest to Ethan Ortiz and Vanessa Cole as joint tenants. He turned the page for signatures. By signing, you acknowledge you understand the nature of your interest and agree to the restrictions within the companion agreement. Pens moved. Paper made the crisp sound of a bedsheet snapped in sunlight. Ethan signed where yellow flags asked. Vanessa's signature started firm and curved smaller at the end. Marlene's letter sat upright and legible, a school secretary's hand that had addressed envelopes and field trip forms and condolence notes. Whitaker notarized his seal, leaving a raised ring you could find with your thumb long after ink dried. Riley slid the lease across next. Effective on recording, he said, and pointed to the clause that sent rent to Marlene on the first. Vanessa read the line twice. She initialed in the margin with a letter that hooked in a dot that landed neatly. The private agreement, 2 pages plain, went last. Ethan's palm left a faint heat print on the paper when he lifted it. "We'll meet Wednesdays at 5, he said, the sentence neither promise nor wish. Just the logistics of a life. Whitaker gathered the sign sheets, squared them into a stack, and tucked them into his case. "I'll walk these to the recorder this afternoon," he said. "By tomorrow, the database will reflect the change." He shook hands again, the same order, the same pressure. "Good day to you." When the door shut, the room took a breath. The printer light blinked idle green. Riley recapped his pen, clicked off the recorder, and slid his copy of the agreements into a labeled folder. "You'll get PDFs in your inbox within the hour," he said. "Hard copies by mail." He looked around the table to make sure no one had left a wallet, a phone, a question that could turn into a wall later. That's all for today. Chairs scraped softly. Coats found shoulders. Ethan held the door and then let it swing shut, catching it with a palm because the closer gave more resistance than expected. In the hall, the radio behind the reception desk played a station that favored guitar intros. Elevator doors opened on an empty car. They stepped in. The doors closed with the hush of carpet under a library chair. The glass in the lobby held their reflections briefly, 3 figures aligned by accident and record, and gave them back to the day. On April 1st, a rented box truck sighed at the curb, hazard lights blinking. The Jeffersons, Alyssa, with a teacher's tote, and 2 children the ages of growth spurts carried their lives up the walk in plastic bins and taped cardboard. Marlene stood on the porch with a clipboard and a copy of the floor plan addendum. The avocado magnet pinned the new chore chart to the fridge. "Welcome, Ethan," said voice, careful but not brittle. "Afternoon," Alyssa answered, meeting his eyes like a person used to parent-teacher conferences that go both ways. She wore a gray sweatshirt with a school logo cracking at the sleeves. "We'll stay out of your lanes." "We'll make lanes," Vanessa said, and stepped back from the doorway so the bins could pass. The designated bedrooms swallowed boxes. Nia's curtains went up, first pale yellow with tiny suns. Jay leaned his bike against the garage wall and taped a handwritten label to the handlebar, "Not trash." Alyssa placed a casserole on the counter with a pot holder under it. "Dinner," she said. "If you want it." No sales pitch, no apology. They ate at the long table because the lease said 2 Saturday dinners a month each way, and a first day counted as a Saturday somewhere. The casserole was chicken and rice with rosemary. The kids compared library cards and shoe sizes. A conversation about where to keep the colander ended with masking tape labels on 2 cabinets. Vanessa, who had once called the island my prep surface, listened while Nia explained why spoons should live near bowls, because mornings are faster that way. "Makes sense," Vanessa said, and meant it. The first friction came over water. Jay took a shower that lasted the length of a playlist. "He's 14, Alyssa said, not defensive, just descriptive. Vanessa held up a copy of the utilities clause and pointed to the line about shared costs. "We'll set a timer," Alyssa said. "No arguments." Jay rolled his eyes and set a timer on his phone that night, loud as a fire drill. 5 minutes is criminal," he muttered. 7, Alyssa countered. "Meet me halfway." Labels multiplied. Fridge. AEV Kids JN. Laundry slots. Monday/Wednesday. Friday. After 5 for one household Tuesday. Thursday. Saturday for the other Sunday floating. The chart lived on the fridge door and got initialed in neat capitals. The avocado magnet held. Therapy on Wednesdays at 5 fit between Ethan's product sink and the kids' soccer drills. The counselor's office looked out on a strip mall where a nail salon set neon glowing by 4:30. Ethan sat in a chair that was too soft. and said things that sat on his tongue like unfamiliar candy. Marlene, who could keep a ledger without blinking, sometimes held a tissue by one corner and didn't use it. They didn't jab the past with pitchforks. They set it on the table and named the items. "You assumed I was fine," she said once. "I thought silence meant consent," he said. Then winced at how practiced a sentence could sound, even when true. They learned to wait for each other to finish. They learned to leave 3 beats after an apology so the air could stop ringing. At home, Nia taped her latest watercolor 2 houses under a single sun to the pantry door. Jay and the older kid ran driveway drills and argued about crossover steps. Vanessa learned the rhythm of footsteps that meant whose turn it was to get a glass of water. On a Thursday, she knocked on Alyssa's doorframe and said, "I'm ordering a Costco run. Do you have a list?" The list came back with 3 lines in please and thanks on it. "I can get more," Vanessa said. "We're good," Alyssa answered. The word good stretched to cover more than groceries. Sundays began to belong to a park. Marlene met Ethan and the kids at City Park by the lake, where geese traveled in small committees and teenagers in hoodies took graduation photos against the skyline. She brought paper sacks with apple slices and the cookies she never admitted were from a mix. She didn't take pictures for anyone else. She kept 1 or 2 a sneaker scuffed from bike brakes, a hand shadow on a bench slat, a blurry grin that still counted. Small changes showed up like flags no one planned. Vanessa said, "Excuse me," before reaching into a drawer someone else was using. Alyssa refilled the salt when she emptied it. The kids learned each other's snack brands. Ethan left his work laptop shut during dinner. When the water heater's new valve clicked, Marlene texted Alyssa the warranty folder location. Alyssa texted back a photo of the tab water heater thumbs up implied without emoji. On a weekday in late summer, Marlene's bank app showed 2 deposits before noon. The rent auto debit and a standalone payment labeled Co-Owner Plan EV. She didn't screenshot it. She put the phone down and went to the recreation center up the block where 6 women and a man learned to purl without splitting the yarn. "Rap from the back," she said, and the room lengthened its inhale. She wore a name tag that stuck slightly crooked to her cardigan, Marlene with a flower under the E that one of the seniors had drawn at break. In September, Alyssa's classroom had a book fair. A flyer went home in both households. Vanessa sent cash in an envelope. Marlene added a check with a note for the kids who forget. Alyssa texted a photo of a student holding a paperback like it might hatch. Ethan made grilled cheese for everybody on a Wednesday because he'd promised once and forgotten twice and didn't want to forget again. October delivered a hard wind. Leaves clogged the drain at the back patio. Jay and the older kid dragged a rake and cleared it without being told. Vanessa found them cold juice boxes and said, "Good work," as if the words had weight again. That night, the thermostat clicked and the furnace started and the house lifted its shoulders against the season. On a Tuesday at 4:12 p.m., Vanessa stood in a coffee shop off Colfax with a folder under her arm. Marlene arrived with flour on one cuff from the class where someone had insisted on bringing banana bread. They took a table by the window. The folder contained a bank offer and a spreadsheet columns lined up interest gentle, a 5-year plan that would put 40% and 60% into one number. Vanessa slid it across. "It's workable," she said, "if you agree." Her voice didn't reach for anything beyond the paper. Marlene read. She traced a row with her finger and nodded at the little places where math met memory. "It's clear," she said. They didn't shake hands. Vanessa exhaled like someone who had been carrying a box and set it down. Recording day fell on a Tuesday. Mr. Whitaker met them at the counter, stamp ready. Pens moved. Paper made its crisp sound. The clerk slid a receipt under the glass and said, "Give it 1 business day." They walked out into a sky the color of pencil lead. Traffic on Broadway flowed the way traffic does when everyone is going somewhere ordinary. Vanessa said she'd pick up the kids. Ethan said he'd handle practice drop-off. Marlene said she had class at 6. No one tried to keep them standing in a circle in the wind. In her apartment above the flower shop, not large, not fancy, a window that took the afternoon, Marlene opened the bank app again and saw the first installment land. She watered the spider plant that refused to die and set a postcard on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tiny red truck. The postcard showed a lighthouse. It had come in the mail from no one she knew. The rec center handed out extras for collage. She liked the way the beam looked painted on rough card. On Sunday, Ethan and the kids met her at the lake again. They brought stale bread for the geese and a thermos of cocoa. The wind fingered the water and let it go. The smallest hand fit in hers and swung once then again because swinging made time behave. A woman with a camera asked if they wanted a photo. They said yes. Marlene stood between the kids. Ethan's shoulder touched hers. The camera clicked. She checked the screen and saw 4 faces and a sliver of sky. No one was missing. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.